Good morning. Today is Sunday, November 9th, 2025, and this is the weekly Bitcoin price forecast. Looking at where Bitcoin went in the last week and where it could potentially go in the future. So, November has been a down month. So, the first week of November was down across the board, not even just in Bitcoin, but you saw that in the NASDAQ, the stock indexes. Even things like gold kind of tanked over the course of the beginning of the month. A lot of this has to do with things like the government shutdown. There's a tightening in the liquidity space. It's just not as much money flowing around the system at this point. So, I mean, from what I see at this point, we were at 109 and we dropped all the way down to a low about 99, 98, depending on what chart you're looking at. So we did get below 100,000. So at this point, again, 100,000 is a pretty strong level, I think. But at this point, I do believe that we could go a little bit lower. Seeing us break this range low, because again, we had this was resistance. It came down, couldn't break that, and then it got some ammunition and came back up. Resistance again. It broke above it. Okay, well now this level comes down. We see is support at about 107, and eventually it did finally break this level, and that's a pretty strong break. Especially considering that we're this early in the month. So at this point, I do suspect that we could see some more sustained downturn at this point. I've talked about a couple different levels. At this point, I am expecting to see probably 86, 88, somewhere in that range, because again, that coincides with a couple different levels. There's some imbalance that has yet to be cleaned up in that area. 88 kind of marks the 21 month moving average. So we'll have to see what that ends up looking like. I've talked about for several weeks that it could be a possibility. And I'm thinking that's about as low as it can go for that time period. If you kind of look at the past periods of Bitcoin, we're talking about a bull market, right? So you had 2017 that ran all the way up, like I think that was like thousands of percent. I think that was like 2,000% that it ran up. And then, 2021, it ran up another 800% from the bottom to the top. This time it ran up, I want to say about 3x. So, actually, it was more than that. It's about 600% that it ran from the bottom. So, I mean, that does show some type of diminishing returns. But I think also the dynamics have changed largely since that period. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in terms of who's actually owning Bitcoin and who is actually, keeping it in their wallets and whatnot. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But overall, I think I could see at this point, there is some structural integrity here at this level. So, I mean, I don't think it's just going to be a clean break below this level. But if it does, I suspect that it'll go down to about 88 or 86, somewhere in there. And then we could, I think we'll either see a range right there or just a continuation back to the upside. So time will tell. That depends on a couple different things. Monetary policy, whether they keep cutting rates or if there is a broader sell-off in the stock market. Since Bitcoin is somewhat correlated to the NASDAQ, I do believe that will cause some type of drawdown with the two. They're not just quite independent just yet. So yeah, let's take a look at the weekly chart and see what we have. So again, we have this range here that went from actually here to here. This whole area is still a range, right? So you could say that, hey, this is a bottom period. From here where we had resistance came down, and then and I talked about this on the monthly chart, but this is an area of technically support at this point, especially considering you're at your 100-week moving average too. That is a pretty strong level historically. Even like we look here, and we see that, all right, well, this is an area where price historically bounces off of. Nothing is guaranteed, but I do believe that is a pretty strong level, especially considering that it coincides with the 100 moving average. The $100,000 level, which is a very strong level historically, just psychologically, if nothing else. So yeah, it did kind of break out of this range here. So if we consider this a range and this a range and this a range and this is a range, well, it broke below that 109 area. Let's turn on the drawings real quick, and I'll show you why I believe that this is still a somewhat strong area. That's not what I want to do. Okay. Drawings are on this level. I've modified a couple different prices. So you have your long-term holder realized prices updated as of this morning to 37,000, 56,000 for your realized price. And then short-term holder realized price is actually below this level at this point. So people are moving Bitcoin around this level. This is where people are in recent history moving Bitcoin. So you have 100,000 here. You have the bottom of this channel, which I believe is huge. And it's been going this way since, October of 2023. Just the up, down, up, down, up, down. And then, hey, are we going to see another up move to about 140, 150? Or do we see a broader down sweep? Again, I'm talking about to 86 to 87. I don't think that we see these crazy crashes like we saw in the past anymore, to where, Bitcoin's dropping 70, 80%. So if we did this right now, a 70% drop, as we've seen historically, would bring it down to the longer-term holder realized price, which would bring it down to like 37,000. I don't think that's realistic. Even a 50% crash in Bitcoin would take you below your 200-week moving average, and it would take you down to your realized price of 57,000. That would, in my opinion, mark some type of end of the, whatever bull market into a more sustained period of ranging. But again, I don't see that as being feasible right now. One reason that I say that is because of the fact that in the past, if we look at the previous bull markets, you had these huge moves that had no pauses at all. You had weeks on weeks on weeks on weeks of nothing but green candles. And then even when it, came down for a little bit, you had another period of about 8 to 10 weeks of just nothing but green. Even over here back in 2017, and it'll show you the same pattern in 2013. You have something like this that goes directly vertical and there is no pauses or anything. That's not sustainable. So that is why you see these 70, 80% crashes that you did in the past versus I like what we have now because this is more sustainable. What you have is you have periods of, hey, this is nothing but green candles from, October 23rd all the way to the beginning of 2024. From the end of last year, September 2024, all the way to the end of 2024, you'll have periods of 6 to 8 weeks to where it runs, but then it'll range for a little bit and build some structure. And now I think we're probably going to a period now where we range for a bit and then probably go back up. So we have two options right now. If we start getting some sustained breaks under here, I think we'll probably go down to about 86,000. Which I think would be, some type of reasonable level to pause at, because again, you still do have this imbalance here. And I'll show you on the daily chart that I think we're actually below the 200-day moving average. So let's see, I think this coincides with I said 88 coincides with the 1 month, 21-month moving average. So let's go down to the daily chart, skip a little bit there. We are actually below the 200-day moving average, which has happened in the past. Like that happened in March, and it sustained below there for weeks actually. So we'll say like maybe from right here to right here. That was a period of 53 days, which was what was that, 2 months? 2 months it stayed below the 200-day moving average, and again it touched this line. It touched this line, the lower channel, and then ended up going back up. Let's see, it did it in the past as well. So a little bit below, in 2024, prior to ended up going on this run in the end of 2024. So this is what I'm saying is this is a relatively strong area. You're still below your 200-day moving average, below your, 50, 100, 200, I'm sorry, 21, 250. So we'll see. It's kind of indecisive right now. This is actually a pretty, I'd say, overall decisive point for Bitcoin. So will it break below here, or will it continue on to the upside? Or will it just range for a while? Or will it just continue to range? If it just continues to range for a while, that's actually a good sign, especially if the broader market starts to sell off. That gives it a real base to actually end up turning around. So I don't think this bull market is over, just because I do see that we have structure now, structure that we did not have in the past. In the previous bull markets, to where it was just this instantaneous run up over the course of several weeks or months, and with no pauses whatsoever. We've had a series of healthy pauses along the way. there are definitely signs of exhaustion here to where, we've stayed in this area since June, actually. June, and just kind of forming a rounded top, here, a rounded bottom. You had a rounded bottom here, and so on and so forth. Somewhat a rounded top, rounded bottom. So we'll see. We'll see how that ends up turning out. So I think that's probably all I need to talk about on the charts. Once you start moving to the lower levels, you see that this is absolutely a downtrend. And when I say that, I'm looking at the moving averages. So your 200 is above your 100. Your 200 is above your 100, which is above your 21. 15-minute chart, it's kind of clustered there, and it doesn't make sense to go down to the 1 minute. But this is showing a complete downtrend ever since late October, and then just sustained down there below. But you do see a double bottom here, and this is probably the longest I've talked on just the chart, so I may wrap this up in a bit. Then I would consider like another kind of bottom here, a little double bottom. If you go to the a lower chart, and actually you probably see that. Triple bottom actually, 1, 2, 3, and then it broke this area too. So we could see some move back up to the top. Again, I said 100,000 is going to be a strong level from what I believe. So yeah, I don't know. Time will tell. This is your bottoms here. It's going to be difficult to just smash through 100K. I do believe that. So look at the economic news. Really probably nothing this week. CPI, inflation. These numbers will not come out until the government. I think they've already said they're not going to release numbers until the government shutdown. So now the question is, hey, when does the government shutdown? Is that going to be November? Is that going to be? Are we going to move into December? Is it going to be before Thanksgiving? Who knows? So really not much to talk about on the economic front. So CPI, which is your inflation numbers, that'll come out year over year whenever it comes out, and then you have PPI, which is your producers index, and then CPI is your consumers index. So we'll see when that comes out. We will see. And talking about Bitcoin and seeing who's actually holding this. So this actually comes from River Bitcoin. Oh, where did it go? River Bitcoin Treasury. They're a Bitcoin company, and they look at the different treasury assets and whatnot. They are really good source of information and a lot of infographics that I really enjoy. Average daily Bitcoin flow dynamics in 2025. This came out in August of 2025. And what it shows is the net sellers are individuals. So I've talked about earlier in the year that now Bitcoin is flowing into a regime where it's no longer the individuals holding, but it's much more of a period where the big players are stepping in. So you have your Bitcoin treasury company. And this has really been the story since 2024. Your Bitcoin treasury companies, so your Michael Saylors and Strategies of the world, and all these other, I think 21 Capital, and then you have a couple others in Japan, and a lot of different players are popping up now who are these Bitcoin treasury companies where basically their only thing is, hey, we hold Bitcoin. Conventional businesses, so your mom and pops, even up to your S&P 500 people who are holding Bitcoin. GameStop is one who had a pretty big Bitcoin purchase in I want to say that was March of this year. Funds and ETFs buying up Bitcoin. So these are your BlackRocks and BlackRocks and Fidelities of the world. Others, I don't know what other means, but governments is governments, and then lost Bitcoin because people do lose Bitcoin still, whether it be a password loss or whatnot. You're losing an average of 14 a day, according to them. So that is, even regardless of its loss, that Bitcoin is not moving. So that overall decreases the supply realistically, and the demand continues to grow. And then, so again, like we said, on the individual side, they are the net sellers. Eventually, this will exhaust. So a lot of what I think we're seeing at this point is a balance period. There's this balance period between the net people who are selling and taking profit, because again, I really did underestimate how strong of a level 100,000 would be to get through. But again, it is a big psychological level, not only for selling too, because imagine you got in at 10,000. All right, well, you just got a 10x, and you could have done that in the span of about 2 years, because Bitcoin hit a low of somewhere around 15,000. So not quite a 10x, but actually, yes, it did, because we hit 116 from 15,000. So no, I guess the 10x would be 150 at that point then. So not quite a 10x, but still A huge profit compared to what some of the other assets might have been. So, yeah, I mean, at that point, you do have a lot of people just taking profit, and you can see that even more so in the hodl waves. Basically, this is where it's showing the different regimes of like how long people had different wallets have held Bitcoin. So greater than 10 years, 7 to 10 years, 5 to 7, 3 to 5, 2 to 3, so on and so forth. You see the legend down here. And what this is showing me is that, as this as this area these are different areas. As these areas on the right get bigger, that means more people are in that regime. So this number is not increasing. It's actually not decreasing, and the area is not, moving at all. It's just stagnant. So what that tells me is that there's a net amount of people who are both entering this 10-year period and leaving this 10-year period. So that dynamic is equal. The same way with the 5 to 7 years. So people in the 5 to 7 band, probably people who have been holding since about 2021 and before, they're pretty stagnant right now. So like there are some who are taking profits there, and then there are some that are jumping into that band. But overall, they're balanced. They're balanced because this area has remained constant. Here, from 3 to 5, this has actually shrunk. So there are less people in the 3 to 5 year band. This area has these different areas, and what I see going down, since these are flat, these are somewhat decreasing, this is increasing. As you go down the chart, I'm starting to see more people hold more and more for longer and longer periods. So these areas are increasing, these levels are going up, these are staying stagnant, and these are getting squeezed. Overall, what I'm seeing is there are a lot of new players entering the game. From what these lower bands are showing me, there are new players who are entering the game, and they're holding to 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, even up to a year. People have definitely been holding for a year at this point, and that really lines up with and actually this band has increased quite a bit, the 1 year, 6 to 12 months, because that coincides with the election. That coincides with the election, which happened a little over a year ago at this point. And people see that there is a bigger and better Bitcoin environment in America. And really globally too, because once America adopts, it forces other nations to look at the situation and adopt as well. So my overall thing at this point, and I'll go back to the charts one more time, is it's if I'm going off of a historical context, this is an area where Bitcoin turns around and shows some resilience and then goes up to the upside. Looking at the broader market and me looking at the NASDAQ and me looking at gold and other things like that, I could see some type of contagion spreading, because I don't have too much confidence in the stock indexes right now. With that, I think you could see some type of a broader sell-off even in Bitcoin too, but that's not systemic in my mind. That doesn't break the overall trend. It breaks this uptrend, but essentially what I'm seeing is that we're not going to go back to those periods of 70 and 80% drawdowns. Even 50% drawdowns would be a stretch. From top to bottom here, even if it got down to 86,000, that'd be a 30% drop for Bitcoin. Honestly, that's nothing. That's really nothing. The bigger and bigger the asset gets, it does become more significant. But a 30% drop, 32, 35% drop, it's not really, in my mind, a super cause for concern. So this has been a much longer one than normal, but I think there's quite a bit to talk about. So, yeah, we will see. We will see how this ends up playing out. And other than that, this has been Chris Talks Crypto. Check out any crypto-based resources on christalkscrypto.com, and I will see y'all on the moon. Take care. Bye-bye.